The date is the 1st of February 2026, and a biting, relentless frost has settled over the granite peaks of the Balmoral estate in the Scottish Highlands, mirroring the chilling finality of the statement that has just been issued to the stunned world. For years, the royal family has adhered to a policy of dignified silence, a strategy of letting the storm rage around the palace walls while they remained immovable and mute inside. It was a strategy born of tradition and discipline, a belief that history judges deeds rather than words. But this morning, that silence was broken, not by a press secretary, not by a nameless courtier hiding behind the veil of anonymity, but by the Princess Royal herself. In a rare, shattering public statement that was broadcast across every major news network within minutes of its release, Princess Anne did not offer the sympathy that Prince Harry might have desperately hoped for after his emotional public breakdown in Geneva. Instead, she invoked an ancient fable that every child knows, but few adults truly understand until it is too late. The shepherd boy who cried wolf. Her words were sharp, devoid of sentiment, and carried the weight of an institution that has finally, after nearly a decade of turbulence, reached its absolute breaking point. She stated that the family, the institution, and the public all heard the alarm bells ringing for years. They heard the cries of victimhood, the allegations of cruelty, and the demands for protection. And when no wolves came, when the threats turned out to be shadows and the accusations turned out to be exaggerations designed for Netflix cliffhangers, everyone simply stopped listening. She expressed a cold fear that this latest cry from her nephew is too late, even if it happens to be real. The weight of that statement has settled heavily across Britain, resonating in newsrooms and living rooms alike with the finality of a gavel striking wood. It was not merely a personal dismissal from an aunt to a nephew. It was an institutional decree. For Prince Harry, whose return to the United Kingdom earlier this month had carried quiet, desperate hopes of forgiveness and reintegration, it marked a brutal public severing of his last remaining threads to the House of Windsor. The door is not just closed, it has been bolted from the inside, and the keys have been thrown away into the River Dee. To understand how we arrived at this moment of absolute exile, we must look beyond the headlines and into the series of betrayals, secret contracts, and emotional collapses that have defined the last 14 days of the Duke of Sussex's life. Earlier this month, Prince Harry returned to London. On paper, he was there for a court case against Associated Newspapers, a continuation of his years-long, exhausting crusade against the tabloid press. He felt emboldened, believing that this trial would finally be his vindication, the moment the world understood he was the hero of his own story, fighting dragons for the sake of his family. He walked into the High Court with his head held high, convinced that the righteousness of his cause would compel the universe to bend in his favor. But privately, hidden from the public docket and the prying eyes of the paparazzi, he had a secondary, far more critical mission. He had submitted a formal, handwritten request to meet with his brother, Prince William, and the Princess of Wales, Catherine. He proposed a face-to-face meeting, away from cameras, away from aides, just family in a room. He wanted to rebuild. He wanted to explain the pressure he was under. He wanted to bridge the gap that he himself had dug with dynamite over the last 6 years. But the Waleses had other plans, and their response was a masterclass in silent, crushing rejection. On January 16, just one day before Harry's commercial plane touched down at Heathrow, William and Catherine quietly boarded a royal jet bound for Aberdeen. Kensington Palace released a brief, sterile statement, calling it a long-standing commitment to visit youth programs in Scotland. But the timeline paints a different, far more deliberate picture. Had they waited just 24 hours, the meeting Harry requested could have theoretically happened. By leaving exactly when they did, by putting the length of the United Kingdom between themselves and the Duke, they sent a message clearer than any press release could ever be. You are not welcome here. There will be no meeting. There will be no tea. There will be no reconciliation. You are a stranger to us now. The physical distance mirrored the emotional chasm that now exists, a void that no amount of apologizing can cross. Harry was left sitting in a hotel room in London, checking his phone for a message that would never come, realizing that his brother would rather fly to the bitter cold of Scotland than breathe the same air as him. While the royals turned their backs and continued their duties with stoic calm, Harry went rogue in a way that no one, not even his own legal team, anticipated. On the night of January 22, he appeared unexpectedly at a media ethics forum in Geneva. There were no PR handlers guiding him. Meghan was not by his side, gripping his hand with her signature intensity to guide him through the crowd. There was no security entourage clearing the room. It was just Harry, a microphone, and a single page of handwritten notes that shook visibly in his grip. He looked gaunt, his eyes hollowed out by sleeplessness, his suit hanging loosely on his frame. He stepped up to the podium and detonated a truth bomb that sucked the air out of the room. He told the audience that he wanted to say clearly to his father, his brother, and the institution he once ran from, that he was wrong about many things. He admitted he was manipulated about others, but he still took responsibility, and he was sorry. The apology was shocking enough, but what followed was the true devastation. Harry revealed that he had received an anonymous email, a digital burn notice from a whistleblower deep inside the entertainment industry. It contained attached documents proving that Meghan had signed a secret commercial agreement with a boutique U.S. media firm called Fremont Media in late 2024 without his consent or knowledge. The deal was essentially to license narrative-based dramatizations of their royal life. It wasn't just about producing content. It was about selling their private conversations, their psychological insights, and their family secrets to be repackaged as entertainment modules. The contract allegedly outlined the monetization of their trauma, creating a pipeline where their private arguments could be turned into scripts. The Fremont Media contract that Harry exposed remains a focal point of legal scrutiny and public horror. Insiders suggest that the deal was structured to bypass Harry's approval by framing the content as fictionalized dramatizations rather than documentary fact. This legal loophole allowed Meghan to sell the emotional truth of their lives without technically violating their joint agreements or requiring his signature. It was a betrayal by fine print. The audio files that were leaked to Harry alongside the contract capture Meghan discussing private family conversations with a cold, transactional detachment. In those recordings, she allegedly discussed how to position herself against Catherine, how to leverage Charles's guilt, and how to edit Harry's image to make him more sympathetic but less powerful. Hearing his wife dismantle his family like a business project was the moment the spell finally broke. Harry stood there on that stage and realized he wasn't a partner in this deal. He was the content. He was the product. He was the raw material she was mining to build her own empire. This collapse didn't happen overnight. The cracks in the Sussex marriage had been deepening for years, hidden behind a veneer of unified fronts and perfectly coordinated outfits. Insiders say the turning point came much earlier, when Harry discovered a diamond-studded necklace delivered to their Montecito estate via private courier. It was labeled as a gift from a Middle Eastern client. Meghan allegedly brushed it off as standard public relations, a perk of the job, a thank you for a speech. But Harry knew better. He had grown up in a world of diplomatic gifts and strict protocols. He knew the difference between a corporate gift and a personal token. He kept seeing items arrive: designer bags, silk scarves, sculptures with no invoices, just gifts from an elusive Gulf-based mogul known only in their circles as MS. When Harry confronted Meghan, asking her to draw boundaries and protect their reputation from being seen as for sale, she allegedly laughed at him. According to sources close to the couple, who have since leaked details of the fight, she called him a fragile remnant of the golden cage he once escaped. It was a direct, vicious jab. She was comparing him to the very institution he destroyed his life to protect her from, implying that his desire for ethical boundaries was just a symptom of his institutional trauma. She gaslighted him into believing that his discomfort with her commercial dealings was actually a form of controlling behavior inherited from his patriarchal upbringing. By August 2025, the tension had become unbearable. Harry had quietly filed for a unilateral divorce, a desperate attempt to break free from the cycle of manipulation, but he withdrew the filing just days later when a photo of his daughter, Lilibet, in a hospital gown mysteriously landed on his phone during a solo trip. Was it a threat? A reminder of what he would lose? We may never know, but the result was clear. Harry stayed for the children, but the marriage, as a partnership of equals, was dead and buried. As Harry's life unraveled in public view, whispers began to surface in London about the path not taken, the what if, that haunts the royal corridors and Harry's own mind. Renewed discussions focused on a match the palace had discreetly championed before Harry ever met Meghan in 2016. Her name was Lady Arabella Montclair. She was known within the circle as the English Garden Rose, intelligent, gentle, and fiercely private. She shared Harry's love of horses, military tradition, and the quiet country life. She was a close friend of his cousin Zara Tyndall, someone who understood the weight of the family name but had no desire to exploit it. They had met at a polo match in 2013, and the chemistry was palpable. They spoke the same language of duty and privacy. But Harry, in his desire to rebel, to find something real and modern, declined to pursue it further. He famously told his father that he wanted to choose love, not what was expected of him. Today, Arabella is happily married to a tech sustainability entrepreneur, living a quiet life in the country, raising her children away from the flashbulbs. For Harry, looking at her life from the wreckage of his own must feel like looking through a window at a warm fire while standing alone in the snow. He didn't realize until it was too late that the freedom he sought with Meghan was just a different kind of cage, one made of glass, camera lenses, and constant commercial demands. He traded the duty of the crown for the tyranny of the brand, and he found that the latter was far more unforgiving. He traded a life of service for a life of sales, and he ended up bankrupt in spirit. The contrast between Arabella's dignified silence and Meghan's relentless noise is the sharpest pain of all. He realizes now that he didn't just lose a family, he lost a future that could have been peaceful. Following the Geneva confession and the realization that his marriage was built on a foundation of manipulation, Harry made his move. On January 23, he officially renounced his California residency. He declared his personal sovereign status, a symbolic move to detangle himself from the American legal and tax systems that had bound him to Meghan's ventures. He didn't move back into a palace. He didn't return to Frogmore Cottage, which was no longer his. He moved into a modest, privately leased residence in Hampshire. There is no security detail standing guard. There is no entourage of assistants. It is just Harry in a house that is silent. He downsized everything. He returned the luxury Range Rover that had been a symbol of their Hollywood status. He fired the domestic staff. He slipped a handwritten note under the door of a former aide before he left California, which read simply that he had lost himself. But he found a reason to start again, even if he had to do it alone. Harry is now a father living in exile from his own children. Archie and Lilibet remain in California with Meghan, who holds primary physical custody. Harry has been reduced to weekly supervised calls on a screen. He is terrified that if he fights too hard publicly, Meghan will turn the children against him, painting him as the unstable villain of their story. It is a paralyzing paradox. Stay and lose your soul to the machine, or leave and risk becoming a stranger to your own children. The sheer quiet of his new life in Hampshire stands in stark contrast to the chaos of Montecito, and in that silence, Harry is forced to confront the magnitude of his loss. While Harry grieved in Hampshire, staring out at the gray English rain, Meghan launched her counteroffensive with the precision of a heat-seeking missile. On the very same day that Harry's confession was trending worldwide, she launched a new platform called Arc Legacy. It was billed as a global initiative for resilience and empowered storytelling. The launch video was a masterclass in rebranding. It showed her walking through a lush rose garden, barefoot, smiling, bathed in golden light. Her narration was unmistakable, speaking of the need to leave behind the narratives others gave us and write the one we were always meant to live. Gone was any mention of Harry. Gone was the title of Duchess. She has rebranded herself entirely: founder, mother, builder, voice. She was photographed in Abu Dhabi, networking with billionaires, wearing diamonds that rumor has it came from her new benefactors. She has traded the Windsor name for a global brand built entirely on her own image. The message was brutal in its efficiency. Harry was just the booster rocket she needed to escape the atmosphere of ordinary celebrity. Now that she is in orbit, she has detached him and let him fall back to Earth, burning up on re-entry while she floats above it all. She has effectively erased him from the narrative of her success, rewriting history to make it seem as though she was always the architect of her own destiny. The timing of the launch was no accident. It was designed to bury his confession under a wave of her own empowerment rhetoric. She didn't just leave him, she erased him. In the quiet of early January, before the Geneva explosion, Harry allegedly wrote a private letter to his father, King Charles III. It was a final attempt to reach out, man to man, son to father. The letter was never formally delivered. Sources say it remains sealed in Harry's travel chest, a physical manifestation of his hesitation. But a confidant who saw the draft shared the final paragraph, and it is heartbreaking. Harry wrote that he understands now what Charles meant when he said duty is its own kind of love. He admitted he wished he hadn't learned that lesson too late. He wrote that he does not ask to return, only to be remembered, not for how he left, but for how he tried to find his way back. It was a plea not for restoration, but for absolution. Those words have reached ears inside the palace, but no one has replied. There will be no balcony photo. There will be no public reconciliation. The monarchy has moved on. Prince William and Princess Catherine are the face of the future, representing stability and duty. Princess Anne is the guardian of the standard, the one who calls out the truth. Harry has become a ghost in the machine, a warning to future generations of royals about the devastating cost of betrayal. He is the living embodiment of the idea that you can have freedom or you can have belonging, but you cannot always have both. The family has closed ranks, protecting the institution from the chaos that follows him. They have chosen survival over sentiment. The king is focusing on his reign, the Prince of Wales on his future, and Harry has been relegated to the past. In Hampshire, the days are quiet. Harry gardens, a hobby he used to mock his father for. He walks alone in the woods, far from the paparazzi lenses that defined his life in California. He visits the local pub unrecognized, sitting in the corner with a pint, listening to the accents of home, and he writes. He is not writing a memoir for Netflix or a tell-all for Penguin Random House. He is writing a private manuscript for his children, a story that he hopes they will one day read when they are old enough to understand. It is a story that begins with a boy in a palace who thought he was trapped and ends not with a return to the throne, but with a whisper of hard-won wisdom, don't chase crowns, chase peace. It is the only legacy he has left to give them, a warning written in the ink of his own regret. The psychological toll of this exile is immense. Harry is grappling with the realization that he was not the hero of the story, but the enabler of his own destruction. He is replaying the last 6 years in his mind, looking for the moment where he could have stopped the train, but realizing that perhaps the brakes were cut long before he got on board. He thinks about the Queen, his grandmother, and the pain he caused her in her final years. He thinks about his grandfather, Prince Philip, and the missed opportunities to say goodbye. The weight of these memories is heavier than any crown. He is learning that accountability is a lonely place, especially when the person you shared the blame with has moved on to a new, shiny life without you. Meanwhile, the media landscape is shifting. The American press, once enamored with the Sussex fairy tale, has begun to turn. The revelation of the Fremont media deal has soured the public on Meghan's narrative of victimization. Questions are being asked about the ethics of selling family secrets. The Ark Legacy launch was met with skepticism rather than adulation. Without the royal connection, without Harry by her side, Meghan is finding that the spotlight is harsher and less forgiving. She is discovering that you can only rebrand so many times before the audience stops buying tickets. But even as her star fades, Harry takes no joy in it. He is past the point of wanting revenge. He just wants peace. Princess Anne was right. The shepherd boy cried wolf one too many times. The world stopped listening to the complaints, the lawsuits, and the accusations. But perhaps the true tragedy isn't that no one listened. The tragedy is that when Harry finally told the truth that he was lost, that he was manipulated, that he was sorry, it was the one time the world had already turned away. The silence that surrounds him now is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of irrelevance. It is the only mercy the crown has left to give him, the permission to disappear. And Harry, at last, is learning to live in it, understanding that the noise of the past decade was not the sound of living, but the sound of drowning. Now, on the shore of his new life, he must learn to breathe again, alone. He watches the seasons change in the English countryside, a rhythm he had forgotten, and he realizes that while he can never go back to who he was, he must find a way to live with who he has become. The prince is dead. Long live the man.